contingency argument, it's pretty basic to I guess like it's really two things, right? It's either there was an eternal something like from the start, or there wasn't, and something just came to be, you know. So if there if, so for A, right, if there's a this for if something has already exist, what is it, and so if we look at how the universe is shaped, and on how there's physical laws, and that how there are things that seems to have intentionality, especially of how these physical laws maintain themselves. I would I guess move from that and make a logical conclusion to, hey, the thing that has come before and is eternal has some sort of agency, right? And this agency, uh of course, I guess like in a huge, uh in a mega scale understanding of everything in view, God seems to be this necessary being that sort of does make sense. And oh, he's the one that probably did create everything. So in a normal human thought process, so because for me, like, I wouldn't it's just not logical for there to be nothing and then just something to exist, right?
I don't. Yeah, I don't think nothing, quote unquote, existing is coherent as a concept. Because existence is something that is gonna it's gonna be it's gonna be a function on something. So if you were to say, quote unquote, nothing exists, you're talking about something that is not a thing, and it's doing something which is existing. So that's sort of incoherent to me. But
Well, nothing as an abstract concept, it doesn't, of course, technically it doesn't exist, but it can make sense. Like, for example, if I say, oh, there's nothing inside my bottle, yeah, there is nothing inside
right,
that
well,
bottle.
there isn't. The idea is that what that means is that there isn't a thing, right? That's what the word would mean
So
in that
exactly.
context.
So be where nothing,
Like nothing
where yeah,
isn't a thing unto itself. You're saying there's not a thing, right?
exactly. So be sort of course, obviously, can't be the option, because it just doesn't make sense if there can be something out of nothing.
Sure.
Right. So we
I
go
mean,
then from the A option, where, hey, if there was something from the start of everything, so what is this? And uh, how did it start? Like, all these complicated stuff, what is the source? That was the
well,
yeah.
I think all we can really conclude from that is that
Hmm.
there's always been something there, whatever
Exactly.
that is. That's
Perfect.
very
Yeah.
general, though.
That's a good starting point. That we can both agree that there's always been something there. So maybe you could. So so here's the thing, though. If you're, I will also want can I ask you some questions in terms of your worldview, so we could like um
Yeah.
I can grasp a few things. All right. Well, can I ask you about your ethics? What are the foundations for your ethics?
Yeah. So I'm a moral subjectivist, which means that I think morality is contingent on subjects to exist, which maybe you agree. It kind of sounds like you do. um,
Morality is contingent on subjects to exist. I'm confused, man. Can you elaborate?
sure. So if you were to consider like a possible world where there is no minds, no subjects, um, you wouldn't have anything there that morality would refer to.
What is a mind, though?
I mean, on my view, a mind is a type of physical system.
So a mind is no different from any other physical system then. Like
Well, no,
the sun is a
obviously it
mind.
is. No,
Okay,
it's a particular physical system.
So what is a mind?
Well, it's a particular type of physical system, right? That happens inside
Okay,
of
but like
brain.
differentiates it from any other particular physical system?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, like
it's kind of a silly question because there's
like
plenty
for
of
example, like my circulatory system is a particular physical
yeah,
system, right? So what is a
yes.
mind? Like what differentiates it from other particular physical systems?
Consciousness. The answer is consciousness.
Well, no, I mean, we're describing consciousness as a particular physical system. So I mean, that's not what makes it different. It's just
Okay,
that
so
it's like
consciousness
asking me
or
why
mind is
it's like well, no, it's just that wait, what? Of course, a mind is consciousness. Yeah.
He's asking like what are you describing in this physical system that makes it a specific physical system?
what
He's
is
just
the
asking about the
essence
consciousness.
of the mind? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm referring to brains. I'm referring to physical processes that happen in
Okay, well,
brains.
the brain is an organ, but it's not a mind. Like a mind is not equivalent to brain.
Right.
It's not. This is not identical.
There's a process that happens in brains. There's a
Okay,
physical
so the
process.
mind is the process, the physical.
Yeah, it's a system, right? And a system can
Okay.
involve a process, right?
So this particular system is what is it? Is it metaphysical system, or is it the biological and chemical chemistry that and hormones and stuff that occurs
I don't
in the
see a
brain?
difference. I don't see a difference between those two things. I mean, metaphysical, like I don't know what
so
you mean by metaphysical.
So a metaphysical system would be like 1 + 1 = 2, right?
No.
It's not.
No,
it's
I don't
not
agree.
Physical.
1 + 1 = 2 is like a proposition.
Right. Well, can I? Okay, I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not being pedantic, but like, what do you think is the difference between physical and metaphysical?
So physicalism, right, which is a view that everything that exists is physical, that is a metaphysical view.
Okay. Right? And
there's other metaphysical views that are different from that view.
All right.
But
So
so when you ask me what like metaphysical means as an adjective, I don't really know what that means. It just refers to all-encompassing theses about the nature of reality. That's what metaphysics is.
So are numbers metaphysical or physical?
I mean, I'm a physicalist, so they're physical, right?
So numbers, like the number 1 is a physical object.
Sorry to jump in. I think the point he's getting at is that in the definition of metaphysics, it's the fundamental first principles. And so math can usually be considered one of the fundamental first principles. So it can be considered a part of metaphysics.
Mm-hmm. But is it a physics? But the number 1.
Well, you're asking me what the metaphysical nature of a number is. That's not like to just say, oh, it's a metaphysical thing. I don't know what that means. That's not usually what metaphysics is talking about.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me, right? Like I can differentiate the number 1 as a metaphysical thing. You know, it's because it's not in reality, in the physical reality, right? When I say number 1 is an abstract concept, right?
Yeah, but abstract concepts, on my view, are happening in brains as physical systems, right? Mm-hmm. So there's something in my brain when I think number 1, right?
Interesting. So when I say like when I imagine Santa Claus in my brain, Santa Claus, the abstract concept of Santa Claus exists physically.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All the concepts do, but they're things that are happening in brains.
Okay, right. But there's a difference between a physical Santa and like an imaginary Santa that is just purely chemicals in my brain, right?
Like if there was a Santa Claus that concept corresponded to outside of your mind, that would be a different thing from the concept, right?
But yeah, but they're not identical then. So the imaginary Santa and the physical Santa are not identical. They're different because of the fundamental part, substance of the reality.
Well, concepts are things that we're that we're trying to use as maps, right? So it's like a map versus the territory.
So what's very
Santa
interesting,
Claus
right?
in
So,
real life would be the territory, and then you're
So-
thinking of him would be a map.
Good point. Yeah. So my question is like, what's the difference between a physical number one and a metaphysical or imaginary number one that I just conceived in my brain?
Well, I mean, I don't think that. I do think of them as being in our brain.
Are they the same thing?
I don't consider there to be something that concept is mapping onto as like a referent in the world, as opposed to just like it's a concept, right? Like one is a concept.
I'm very confused, bro. So
Yeah.
Are there physical number ones and are they different from the
Well, I'm
number
saying-
ones that I imagine in my brain?
Well, no. There's my point is that the number one that you're imagining in your brain is physical in your brain.
The number one, it's physical in my brain, but it's not actually a physical number one. Like in
It's not like
comparison
floating
to-
out in space somewhere. No.
Yeah,
I mean-
exactly.
But the point is that concepts, like any concept, like a unicorn, is happening physically, like in your brain. So there's something
But it's not an actual unicorn, right? And not an actual physical unicorn.
sure, like not
Right,
outside
so-
of your mind, but it's
Exactly,
physical.
so-
Like the concept is physical. Like that's my
Mhm.
view. So
Okay, that's a good point. Now, though, I guess establishing that, right? When I say, hey, what is a mind? And you say, oh, like it's just like a map that I conceive in my brain. That doesn't actually mean that there's this physical mind out there that is, part of physical reality. It's just an abstract concept that the chemicals in my mind, in my consciousness, sort of made up, right?
well, see,
It's
I
not-
feel like you're kind of getting a lot of wires crossed, like when you say it that way, because you're saying like, well, it's the chemicals that made me do it, but then you're saying like, but there isn't really a chemical thing happening that made me do it also. Like so there's a concept, like everything that we deal in, everything that we trade in and that we use to communicate with each other and that we experience, right, and process internally is all going to be mental, like mental states, right?
Yeah, it's very
But on a
confusing. Though. I mean,
it's all
like
going to be conceptual is what I mean. Like we're always trading and communicating in concepts.
yeah, but for example, like there are let's say in metaphysics, right? There's a concept of substance dualism. You're familiar,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
so
I'm
there's
a monist.
Yeah, a monist, of course. Yeah, because you're a
Right.
physicalist. So
Exactly.
in terms of that, like, what is the essence of you differentiating a mind from any other particular physical system? Because from as a monist, I see no difference. Like,
Well, there's a
because-
difference between different types of physical systems in general. Like a star is different from an ocean.
exactly.
Or like, you
Yeah,
can point to different types of physical
Mhm.
systems. They have
exactly.
different properties, right? So
Mhm. Well, substantially, though, like in essence, the definition of a mind actually is reliant on substance dualism, is it not?
no.
Because okay, well, all right, well, I guess well, you can say no, but that okay, but let me say give you an
Sure.
explanation, right? Well, so for example, when I say like, oh, sorry, my laptop just okay. Okay, so going earlier when I asked you what is a mind, I wanted to ask you because it is really essential and on me understanding the difference of what a mind is from any other metaphysical concept. So can you I'm sorry for being pedantic, but can you tell me what is the difference between a mind from any other particular physical system?
I mean, I could tell you like properties that that minds have as physical systems. Like they have internal views essentially, and they
Internal
have something
view.
called intentionality with an S.
Intentionality, interesting. Okay.
Well, actually, they have intentionality with an S and with a T. It's two different words. But
Intentionality with an S and the T.
Yeah,
I'm confused. Can you DM me or like
Well, so,
type it in the chat?
do you know the word extension?
Extension, right? Like okay, like
There's an opposite word to that called intention. Right, but it's not like intention, like intentional.
extension and intention.
Yeah.
So what is in intention that is the polar opposite of extension? Well, what does that mean?
I mean, it's essentially like a property. It's a mental property. It's like that. It's like an inward nature as opposed to like extension, right?
Inward.
It's how it's used. Yeah.
So physical objects have inward and outward nature.
Some of them. Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, it's like you can have extension in something, like you can have an extension.
But I mean,
in
like
space.
scientifically, how does that work? Like where is that? What do you mean by?
There's a lot of different. There are a few different. There's different theories about this. Like I think this is where it's the theory that. Hey Tom, can you actually tell me the name of the guy that you interviewed? Anirban something. Do you remember his?
So it's
yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it though.
Yeah,
it's just a theory right now, right? Like the outward and inward thing.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we're talking about metaphysics, so none of this has been.
So your definition of a mind, of it having inward properties, is just based on a theory that you haven't proved yet.
No, it's based on multiple different accounts of mind. Like intention with an S is not something that only applies to
of mind. Can you?
No, but I'm saying what I'm saying is in philosophy, like that term doesn't just apply to physicalist interpretations. It applies.
So what does it apply to?
It's used by dualists. It's used by
exactly.
Like,
so like you can reference dualists, but because you're a monist, you can't, right?
I'm not referencing that.
Okay.
I'm
saying
that term is used across the board.
Mm-hmm. So from your worldview, what approach are you taking on the inward properties of physical objects?
Like how does it work in the brain?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the way that it works on that theory is why I was trying to give it just as an example of like how it could possibly work, right? Is that it's like it's fractal. It's creating almost like a virtual environment. Like like a VR
environment. Yeah. Okay.
Essentially, yeah. Like it's
how does that work? It's really confusing to me, man.
How does a computer work, man? Like have you ever
like,
you know what I mean? It's a model.
Because like when you say it's fractal, inward. Yeah. So physical objects have inward properties that are
in a sense, you can talk about them as fractals because they're gonna have properties that are like infinitely divisible, or like have you ever seen the Mandelbrot set, or like a fractal image, like where you zoom in on it and it never ends, but it just keeps kind of repeating the same structures like in periods.
Those are just basically patterns, though. If it's
they're mathematical objects,
but that doesn't mean they have inward properties.
Well, like that's how I conceive of it. Like so, in a virtual.
Conceive of it, though?
I don't know what you're asking exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm really confused because this is the first time I've heard of physical objects having inward properties.
Well, again, I'm talking about a physical system involving like dynamical processes. They're not. It's not just like, oh, there's a lump sitting there doing nothing. Like
so physical systems have complex properties. Yeah, I do.
I'm not even necessarily sure that like minds are the only type of physical system that has this type of property. Like there could be other physical systems that have it as well. But obviously minds have subjective first-person experiences, qualia,
Well, I guess of course we might be going on a tangent here. I hate tangents on conversation. Okay, like let's take for granted that mental the mental systems are a particular physical system, right? And that is the thing that the phenomenon that occurs in your brain, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we were talking earlier before that about your foundations for your moral ethic,
Yep.
right? And so can you sort of repeat for all the new people here your foundations for your moral ethics or morality or ethics?
Sure. So I just
Mm-hmm.
basically gave an account that I'm a subjectivist.
Mm-hmm.
I think morality is subjective, not objective. So because
Okay, just
it's
right.
mind dependent, right?
Mind dependent about, yeah, the mind that of course that we talked about. Yeah,
You
okay.
need to have a mind, right? Which is why I said I thought you might agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
But
so I'm
in my
interested,
view,
yeah. So
yeah,
let's say, if this is just, of course, hypothetical, right? If I say that murder is right,
okay,
how would your subjectivity sort of like say I'm wrong?
I would think you were wrong.
What, you wouldn't think I'm wrong, or
No,
you would?
I said I would just think you were wrong.
How?
What do you mean how? That's what I think, right?
Why?
Why? Because I think it's wrong to kill people. I could give you like
Why do you think it's wrong?
for I don't know why you keep asking me why, because I could just give you like further and further
Yeah,
explanations of like why I think
but
it's
you
wrong.
can give me further
I
explanation.
could give you a lot of reasons why. Do you want me to? I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah, please do.
I, I don't want people I care about to be killed. I don't want to be
Hmm.
killed myself.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think that it's fair to kill somebody for no reason, essentially, like maybe self defense, but
Okay.
um, I think it's violating those people's rights. These are all sort of
Right.
just ideas that
Okay.
right.
Interesting.
But I mean, again, these are just but these are just ideas that I hold to. Right? That's
Okay. So
I mean,
what do
a
you
lot of
mean
people.
by, but of course, if these are ideas that you hold to, they must be
Yep.
also essentially like founded and, part and a huge part and coherent in your whole worldview, right? Because you're a physicalist. So your morality should have physicalist foundation, or
Yeah.
do they
I mean, how
not
does
work together?
yeah? It's they're they're beliefs that I have in my mind. So
Mhm. Okay. All right, cool. That's really interesting, man, because you mentioned fairness, you mentioned human rights, so virtue ethics, human rights, you mentioned you care, so this sort of guess like an idea, a concept of love, right?
sure,
Interesting. So,
but I mean,
but
I
how
don't.
would
I'm I'm not holding to any particular like meta ethical theory or like particular normative theory of ethics. Like
okay,
I'm
so
a
if I ask you this, like, do you think your morality is coherent? Like
um like
your
fully
moral
logically
system,
coherent.
yeah, like the let's say
I'm a particularist, so it's like
a
in a sense it is.
particularist.
Yeah, in a
But
sense it is because
can you
it's
define what
it's
a particularist is?
yeah. So particularism is usually contrasted with like universalism. So a universalist position is going to say like, here's a set of rules, and these rules dictate like how you figure out what's right and wrong. A
So if you're a
particularist is going to say there.
particularist, yeah,
Yeah,
but from my understanding is that when I say murder is right and you say murder is wrong, so that particular truth is truth for you, and what the truth that I believe is particularly true for me. That's what a particularist is, right?
not exactly, but I mean that's just subject. That's just what it means for it to be subjective. Like it just is the case that I think it's wrong and you think it's right. That's just the
So,
way that
but
things are.
so how do you apply particularism in that case? Like,
Well,
how
particularism is more of like you might so you as the person who thinks it's right, you might be a universalist. You might think that there's universal rules for morality, and then you believe that, right? You believe that murder's right or whatever. And then I might be a particularist, and I think it's wrong to kill people, right?
What's the
But
difference though?
it's not always going to, because it's not always going to be wrong. Say like you're basing it on a rule that like it's always correct to murder people, and I'm not gonna take a position where it's like a
I
rule that
see.
it's
Okay, I
literally
see.
always wrong to murder someone. I mean,
I
by
see.
definition, I guess with something like murder, it's like you're building in that it's
Mhm.
wrong, but
Mhm. Okay. So what you mean
there's
by
things like that.
particularism is it's a case to case basis, right? Like
Yes,
some
yeah,
cases murder is right, cases murder is wrong.
yep. Well,
Okay.
again, I said with murder, like you're kind of loading the
Of
term with the
course,
idea
yeah.
that it's wrong.
On a
So
case to case basis.
maybe if you said killing instead of murder, just
Oh yeah.
because murder is
Oh right.
like is like understood to be unjustified killing or like immoral
Okay.
killing.
Right.
So
Well, in that case though, like if you're a particularist and a subjectivist and you believe in virtue ethics
no,
and
I don't hold strictly to like virtue ethics.
so can you tell me about fairness? You mentioned fairness. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not something that I'm going to uphold as like an ultimate standard or value. It's just something that I care about like a lot of the time. Maybe like in some ways there are things that trump fairness. Maybe sometimes life's not fair. You see, so like,
So why do you value it though? If you don't
well,
uphold it?
it's just because I see it as good, right? It's like that's how I
Oh,
feel about it.
interesting. Okay, so
I don't know.
yeah. I'm very particular because I do. Please check it out. All right. Well, yeah. Okay. So it's really interesting to me. So when you say it's good, what does it for you? What does that mean, man? Like, is it really like good in the sense that it's essentially good? Like, or what do
No.
you mean by good?
Um, good is just what I personally feel like ought to happen or ought to be done or something
You
like that.
person. So, but it's irrational or irrational
In some ways, yeah.
because it's just based on your feelings.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways, I think that we can apply rationality to the way that we feel in certain ways. So I don't think it's entirely like it's not like there's no reasoning happening. Whatever when we can reason about like moral facts, moral sentences. We can analyze like what we believe and then how we would feel about some situation that we're being presented with. But
So
I
I'm
think
curious
like
though, like.
it's rooted in the way that we feel.
Mm-hmm. But if it's rooted on the way you feel, right? And feelings, of course, are irrational. So they're actually they don't have to be logical in a sense, right?
Yeah, I guess I
So,
understand in some sense.
okay, cool. So in some sense, there's an aspect of your moral subjectivity that has an irrational aspect where it doesn't have to sort of coincide with anything. It's just there because it is.
Well, I think it's kind of like people can feel in contradictory ways about things. So it's like you almost need to build that in. Like, um, you might think that
Interesting.
hamburgers are good, and I think that they're terrible or
Mhm.
something like that. Right?
It's just the
Is that a
preference based
contradiction?
on biology.
Right. Well, I mean, when you say based on biology, like I don't know what that means exactly. Like
Like
biology is that's a field of study. Like we're a part of it. We're a
it's
part of the
the
entire universe.
biology of the human. I mean, that I think that.
Yeah, but two different people are going to have two different opinions about something, right? So that's they have roughly the same biology. They're both humans, so
But of course, yeah. All right. Well, a good point. But I still can't sort of like say see how it makes sense for everything you say because it just because you say it's wrong doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Would
well,
you
in my
agree
view,
with me?
that's all it really means.
Mm-hmm. So if I say like, hey, like I feel like murder is right, so
Yeah,
is it so in my own subjectivity and own particularism, murder is right.
sure.
Interesting. Okay, so then so anyone can be right, and base just because they feel like
Well,
it.
there's no objective fact that's being referred to, so it's like they're right about the way they feel about it. Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Um,
So of course, like if let's say I'm not, I hate using Hitler for this, but like just to give a really good picture for everyone, like so if Hitler felt that the Holocaust was right, then in his own particular and subjective view, he's right.
that's why he did it.
Interesting. So,
See,
so,
I think
so
my view actually accounts for what happens in the world better. Like, obviously, he thought he was right. There's nothing else that's to be said about it, right? Like,
mhm.
why did he do it? He thought it was right.
Hmm. So in this sense, like of course, it's also sort of built on what your morality sort of built on moral nihilism, and then
No,
we're
it's
just
subjectivism. It's not the same as nihilism because I'm saying that there is this thing that we're referring to, but what it is this subjective feature.
well
Like let
when
me
when
ask you
I
this.
say yeah,
Let me ask you. Hold on,
mhm.
wait. Do opinions exist?
Well we I guess I believe in consciousness, and we and consciousness develop different opinions. So yes, they exist in a metaphysical na- nature. Yeah.
Right. So you would say opinions. So you're not a nihilist about opinions, even though they're subjective, right?
Well, okay. So I guess what you're just saying is that moral truths are subjective truths. That's all. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm. So in terms, let's say in a society, right? How would I be able to hold someone morally accountable? If it's everything is just subjective. So it's more of then in the
Well,
end.
why would it make
Just
any difference, right? Do you
what do
think
you
that
mean?
you get the ability to enforce law from like some type of like magical objective morality field around you, or
It's
how do you think
it,
that works?
mhm. Well, so in the end, yeah, I guess what happens then is just a power, like might is right. Like the many who dictate what is right are the ones that are right. Those that are wrong are just subjectively wrong.
Well, I mean, I think that there's ways to like if you're just talking about how you structure society, are you talking about like how you structure society and how you establish laws and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should probably vote, right?
Yeah. So and we vote in those that, of course, form the majority and
If
overpower
there
the
was just a simple answer, we wouldn't need to vote. We could just have an emperor or something, and they could just set the correct laws.
Oh
That's why
my
we vote is because
god!
we disagree about things, right?
Mm. and
Oh,
and of course that well, I guess what I'm my point my own I do agree with you. Yeah, we all of that, but I mean my point is that what the only thing that makes something right is because the majority chose it to be right. That's all that there
I mean,
is.
it's not but it's on my view. There is no saying that because they chose it, therefore it's ultimately or objectively true that that's the way it should be. You see what I'm saying? There's no like third party outside of like each of us.
Hmm. Okay. Well, mm. So in this sense, yeah, like I guess it does. Um, so I guess there's just a power struggle and what is right, yeah, and like and in the end, if the majority of people say murder is right and vote that murder is right, then we have the purge and
oh
everything. Yeah.
my god!
Yeah, but there's
This
reasons
guy's
why that doesn't
so fucking
happen. So
annoying.
like your society would kind of fall apart like
I'm
your
gonna kill
society did that.
myself. This guy's so annoying.
Oh yeah,
Oh my
exactly. Okay. All
god!
right. Well, I guess I got a good grasp of your moral system. That's interesting, man. Like I'm not okay. Do you have any other questions for me?
Sure. So we went through morality, we did contingency argument. So I'll give you a quick argument for why I think it's more reasonable to be an atheist. How about that?
All right.
So I would assume that a lot of the gods that you know, older religions, right, than Christianity, let's say, you would say that most of those gods were human inventions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I could give like a pretty simple, like inductive case that if you have all of the prior examples of gods being human inventions, and you basically see that all around the world people have been inventing gods for all of human history,
Okay.
then it's reasonable to conclude that if you're presenting me with some god claim, that it's likely that it's an invention.
There's a no, well, I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say put it in in a probabilistic sense, but I'd say that it's, of course, it's not 100. There's a percentage that in chance that I might be saying right, and I might be saying something wrong. Yeah, because like if I am stating a proposition that, hey, my God is real, so it could be wrong and it could be right.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
hmm so in this sense, yeah, so what was your point?
Basically, it's just an inductive like argument. So it's not saying that it's like a deductive proof. It's just saying that
And
you can make
all
this
theists
inference that it's
recognize,
likely.
yeah. Mhm. we
I don't think so.
Oh, well, I guess not all, of course. Apologize for that. I take that back. Not all. Yeah.
So
That comes. Some theists, I mean, recognize that when they state a proposition that God is real, they might they that that proposition could possibly be wrong and could possibly be right or false or true.
So
I'm
I
sorry for
mean,
my English, man. Like I'm Filipino.
oh no,
I do my
no, that's
best.
fine. No, that's totally fine. Yeah, I guess like the idea is that it's to say that it's reasonable to make the inference that like a god claim that's being presented to me, and I guess you were saying before that you don't think that you can really prove it either, which is fine.
Exactly.
But I guess this is kind of saying it's like, well, you should actually lean towards that it's just been invented.
I don't know. Like, why would I lean on it being invented?
Well, just because like all the past examples were invented, so it's basically just it's what the prior examples kind of like what you would predict the next one to be would be invented.
That's sort of a fallacy, isn't it? Though,
It's a little bit
when
different from a
you,
fallacy because so you're thinking of like the black swan fallacy, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So the
exactly.
black
That
swan
is exactly
fallacy.
what it is.
Well, no, the black swan fallacy basically says like because we've only ever seen white swans, therefore there are no black swans, right? But
Mm.
what induction is saying is it's like, well, it's more reasonable to infer that you're not gonna that the next swan you see will probably be white, basically, and that actually is like pretty reasonable.
Induction in terms if you have a closed group, right? Of if you considered all the variables in that closed group have been considered, but you don't know, maybe like, but if it's if it's an open set where there are still unknown variables in it, you're basing your induction on a set with unknown variables. So I would still say that's a black swan fallacy, because you're sort of applying, that property of God's being invention to all possible gods that are offered to you.
Well, no, it's what it's saying is like the next case that I'm presented is likely to be an invention. It's not saying that all the other possible cases are definitely inventions, right? That would be the fallacy. But
I wouldn't say I'd see no reason why it would be you would like if 10 people gave me, if 10 people lied to me, the I like it would not be reasonable for me to expect that the 11th person would lie to me. Like, I
Well, it
see
would
no
be like
logic in that.
it would be more like if every person you would ever talk to had lied to you, the next
But you
person
don't
would.
know but you really have no idea if the next person will lie to you or not.
But it's
Because
reasonable to infer that it's likely that they
why?
will.
What is the
You're
reason for
clearly
that?
correct because you're clearly surrounded by like a lot of liars. Assuming it hasn't only you haven't only talked to like a handful of people, right? There's definitely a case to be made that like you should have been given like enough examples.
Well, maybe like in a common sense or intuitional sense thing, but like in a logical, purely logical sense, there is in fact no reason why you should doubt the 11th person, because the 11th person is an unknown variable. Like, it's it's it
Well,
could
okay,
it could
here
yeah,
it's basically
like
like pattern
like the
recognition.
I would say it's more of the boy who cried wolf, in terms of that. Hey,
It
like
is, but I mean,
yeah.
in that if the boy who cried wolf had cried wolf like 50 times,
Well, you
there's
never
a
know.
reason
There might actually be a
there's a
51st.
reason why he dies, and it's because everybody is like, yeah, like this kid's probably lying,
I
right?
want to hear Tjum's thoughts on it.
That's how they reasoned about it. So it's like it's not induction can you can make an inductive inference and be wrong about it, right?
Okay,
So
so it's
that's
just an
not
induction. Okay, so you might be wrong about your induction that any proposal for a god might be wrong, might be false because of other false gods that are made by human beings.
well. It's just to say that like I mean we got to be talking about what like thousands of gods over the
Yeah, but
course of human
yes,
history
but
that
still, right?
you're gonna agree
Like,
with me are all just invented,
well, okay,
right?
well, let's put it this way, yeah. Like, I could sort of turn the table around and say, hey, there is a one true God, but because all human beings sort of have their an innate, I guess, like inclination or natural inclination to believe in a God. So they sort of evolved and created their own cultures because they were disconnected at some point in history to the one true God. So that's why. So it's more likely that there is a one true God because of this natural inclination that of human beings producing gods of their own because it's part of who they are. Right? I could say that too, and
Yeah,
that could be an induction.
I think that. Well, I don't think that that's induction, but I think that that could account for some of
Okay,
what
so
I'm
you
arguing.
would recognize my point in that
But I
sense
think it
too.
would still. Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of just accounting for the same information via a different route, but I don't know if it kind of negates the idea that like you're still rejecting those gods as essentially fictional.
Hmm.
So like you'd have to say something like they're fictional, but right, they're based on my god or something like that.
Okay, so let's take I'll take for granted, right? Like, okay, right? I do recognize that. Hey, if there's a bunch of liars of about false priests or false prophets around there or false, it's likely the case the next one might be false. So what are your other arguments? Let's yeah,
A
let's
different
grant
argument.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, we could talk about how
So why does it make more sense?
we could talk about how like what the expectations are like given each view like simpliciter like just if there's a god then what do you expect the universe to look like versus like if there's not a god what would you expect the universe to look like.
Well, the universe is what it is, though. And
Sure.
I really don't know any. I can't really say what the universe would look like without or with a god, because
Right, but I guess that means that it could be explained without one, right?
we don't know. because because right, if we consider the possibility that, hey, It's either A, there is a God, there's, and B, there is, we, but we, because we are the
Sorry.
exact result of we are the, I guess, the result. I'm sorry, I'm mumbling right now, but yeah,
Oh, no, you're
the
good.
point, right?
I know it's late for you, dude.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, I mean, I guess like that's more in line with like a cosmological argument that would kind of address the idea that like the universe is caused. I'm not even sure that makes a lot of sense to say in a certain respect, but
Alright, how about this, right? Can you define what an atheist is? Because there are two ways that the
two,
atheism is defined. Uh,
probably more than
there's,
two, but yeah, two big
yeah.
ones.
So the big one is that atheism is simply an absence of belief. So A meaning like absence of theism. So
Yeah,
as long so a for example, an agnostic is an atheist, right? Because
yeah, on that definition.
yeah,
It depends on which. See, there's actually two definitions for agnostic as well. So
yeah.
that's where it gets a little tricky.
So how would you define your atheist?
I mean, I will take either one of the
What do
positions.
you mean either one?
So I guess I'm. I mean, if you're a strong atheist, then you're also a weak atheist. So I guess I'd take both. I
So
would
are
say
you a
that.
strong atheist, or are you,
Yeah,
which one are you?
yeah, because I believe that there is no God. So
Okay. But do you know that there's no God?
um, no, I wouldn't say that because I think
Okay.
I mean I could say that like I have just certain justifications for why I believe that, but I just don't think that they're really strong enough to say like I know because I think you have to say you have to be pretty confident to say that you know. I think.
You have to be 100% confident to to say you know,
Well,
right? Yeah.
that I don't agree with, but
Mhm.
maybe 100% confident, maybe, but like when people talk about whether or not you could fail to, you could know, you can always be wrong, right? So you can know things even though you might be wrong, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's like fallibilism in epistemology is basically just saying that any justification that you have could actually fail to, well, it's going to suggest that the proposition is true, but it can always fail to guarantee that it's true. So it basically
hmm
rules out like certainty in that respect.
hmm So can you tell me what are your reasons as to why you believe there is no God? Because belief is different thing from knowledge, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I was giving some of them before. Like, I do think that um, I think the world looks like it was just created through natural processes. Um,
Created.
well, maybe, yeah. The world has developed to be the way it is, the way we see it, due to natural
Mhm.
processes.
Okay.
Um, so I think that, and I tend to also think that like there's plenty of models in physics that either have like eternal past or like um, essentially like even if the universe has a beginning, like it doesn't have to have some kind of like external cause. Like in any of these physical theories, like cause isn't really part of the fundamental laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
It's more just like the way that something evolves according to like laws. So, I mean, in my view, like everything can be explained that way, and then I don't understand why. I think that if there were a god like
I mean,
that,
like,
that's not what
mhm.
we would expect to
Well,
necessarily be seeing.
mhm. Okay. Well, what I'm getting from you is that what you're saying is that, hey, I believe that there is no God because I've compared several models of how the universe came about, right? And of course, you have considered all theories like infinite regress, but towards and or that there is like a B theory of time where they're actually like and stuff like that. So, but for
Yeah,
me,
I think
I
something.
actually did the same, which and so I guess I would follow some sort of like the principle of sufficient reason, the PSR, yeah, and
Yeah, so
I would mhm.
we were talking about that a little bit earlier. So like the PSR, if you hold to it and you think there's no brute facts, um, it'll lead to necessitarianism, and we can run through that if you want to. It's kind of interesting.
All right, well, can you let's go a bit. Like, please educate me on that. I'm not really familiar on that area.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be able to deliver it like
It's
100%
okay,
like
man. Yeah.
formally, but if you look into Graham Oppie on this, like he's the
Uh-huh.
one that it came from. I think he's actually getting it from somebody else too. But basically, if you were to trace back, say like you have a contingent fact, and then that fact has an explanation, right? And if that explanation is also a contingent fact, then that needs an explanation, right? So it's basically this dependency relationship.
Mhm. So like what's your so in terms of like perfect justification that you can never get one. Is what you're saying of
No,
necessitarianism.
this is this is this is a little bit different. This is a little bit different. Basically, what it gets to is if you try to terminate like this chain of contingencies, right? Contingent states that say give rise to like the next contingent state. It doesn't really even have to do with like justifications or anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you were to say like you look at something around you and you say like, well, this is a contingent. It's a contingent fact that like this ball exists, right? Because contingent just means like it could have been some other way, something like that. That's usually the definition of contingent in this definition, like in the contingency argument, right? Um,
No.
are you familiar at all with that, or?
Well, yeah, I guess like I am from so here's the thing, right? When I say the universe has always existed, and we agree, both agreed on it earlier, right? But in terms is there actual causality that occurred in terms of like on the universe being before and now where it is?
Um, there could be like there's like theories of causation like in philosophy that like are pretty like all pretty like strange to me, and I don't really like subscribe to specific like theories of causation. But like again, like causation isn't really like part of like fundamental physics or anything like that, which is where like I think everything is basically like coming from, is like we can describe like the fundamental physics, and like everything else is basically emerging from that. So
I guess in if we are to actually be normally functioning human beings, we actually have to sort of presuppose causation as an actual thing that occurs.
it's like it's a concept for us. I think it's similar to like numbers, you know.
Mhm. But of course, in how we make sense, causation is in fact presupposition. Would you agree?
No, not really.
Well,
I
what do
don't
you
think it's
mean?
well. You think that it's a presupposition in the sense that like we look at everything and expect that it has a cause, or
Like I forgot who the philosopher was. I think it was like so. I apologize. I do need some sleep. But yes. So in terms of causation being a presupposition, right? Like if I say that, hey, like yesterday I ate apples, like, but how do you like? How I mean, or if I punch a tree, my hand will break. My bones will break. How I the how do I know for a fact that the first state will become the next state?
yeah,
In terms of how we know things, we simply presuppose them because of course it's purely based on our senses. And of course, in terms of senses, if we really look at it, the most fundamental rationality on how we can make sense of our senses, we simply take our senses for granted, or otherwise we would be solipsists, right?
Sure. Like, yeah, there's definitely things like that we epistemically kind of have to start with and build from. I think, like, for sure. But I think, like, at the same time too, like, there's like epistemology, and then like and how we're learning about things, and then there's like metaphysics and ontology, which like we were kind of getting into both. So like I
Mhm.
think there's not like in like metaphysics with like contingent states and necessary states, like that's more like they are what they are, whether or not we know about them, sort of thing, in the way that we talk about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but they could be just, like, they're a mad scientist could be just inputting all these information in your brain and in your conscious,
Sure.
and you'd never know, right?
Yeah. I just don't know if that's exactly this, like, I don't know if it's addressing the same ideas, but like, yeah, I mean, you mean like a brain in a vat or something
Yeah,
like this?
so that's why I say that, like, causation can be a presupposition, is a presupposition. But all right, well, I guess, like, it's been almost an hour, man, and I wanna to close. I want you to sort of like deconstruct my why I believe in God, because I did claim that I am a theist. Right? Maybe you could help me out and convert me to atheism.
All right.
So,
Well, I'd say this. You're Christian
yeah, I'm
or
Christian.
okay? um, do you really think that an all-powerful God that created the entire universe would
Hmm.
leave it up to a bunch of people to write a book for him?
Well, it's not just that. I mean, like, my theology is very widespread. I guess, like, what bigger than that. So, you could help. I guess I could maybe break it down for you, sort of. So, mm, because your question is sort of, I guess, straw manning. I apologize, but it sort of is, because, like, it does not encompass some of my views.
Sure.
All right.
I mean, I
So,
assumed
see.
you'd believe in the Bible, but I didn't know if you
Mhm.
don't.
Right. Well, I do believe in the Bible. Yeah. So, is that your question?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, do you really think God would want to communicate to the entire human population for all of history by like writing a book? Like, books are very open to interpretation. I mean, that's kind of
Not
just a
he
fact about
didn't just he didn't
books.
just guess, like, of course the Bible is both God divinely inspired and human, and of course, written by man. When I say but did God entrust it to purely the Bible? There are other ways that God did it by actually uh, giving us his own only begotten son Jesus Christ to die on the cross, right, and show miracles. And the of course the disciples and all the believers that saw these things and witnessed them and had testimonies, they shared these testimonies, and manifested into uh, letters and churches and people believing in Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like you could take. I mean, I understand like you believe that all of that actually happened, but it just seems to me like there might be a better way of making sure that everybody knew about all of that than like leaving it up to a book.
So what would be? I guess there is a reason for why this occurred, right? In terms of, because I have my own theodicy on this, but
Yeah, you could. I mean, yeah, it's up to you if you were if you want to call it there. That's totally fine. Maybe we can continue it
yeah,
again.
yeah, man, it's 7 a.m. man. I haven't
Yeah, no
slept yet,
worries.
but Tijab, I hope that the conversation was great. I I did my best. I apologize for if I mumbled a lot.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation. Thanks for Quantum for jumping in to be the atheist guide for it. Thanks again for everybody for listening, and I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Take care. And guys, check out Elmo's little podcast. All right. Bye. It's nice talking to you, Quantum. All right.
You too,
Gotta
man.
go.
Oh, that was cool. Are
Thanks
you gonna
again.
keep this? Yeah, no worries. Are you gonna